Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into some fascinating research you've shared with us. It's a little unnerving, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah.
It's a look at the biggest global threats we're facing in 2024, as analyzed by, political scientist Ian Bremmer.
Right. We've got excerpts from his top risks report. And then, of course, we always like to pull in any interviews, articles, anything else he said about it. Get that full picture for you. And I have to say, the guy, he does not sugarcoat things.
He really doesn't. Some of this stuff, I'm telling you, nightmares.
Yeah.
But that's why you're here. Let's help us unpack it all, figure out what it all really means. So.
Yeah, happy to be your guide through the apocalypse. I'm just kidding.
Oh, man.
Mostly kidding. But really, to understand these risks, we need to understand the playing field, right? And Bremmer argues that we're now in what he calls a G0 world, which he actually first talked about back in 2012. You had that marked in your notes, so.
I did. I don't know, that phrase, it's just always kind of stuck with me. But I'll be honest, I'm still not totally clear on what it means for, everything.
Yeah, it's a crucial concept to wrap your head around because it really underpins so many of the risks that we're going to talk about. So, G0 world, basically what it means is there's no single superpower running the show anymore. Those old rules, with America at the top, calling the shots, they're gone.
Okay, so it's like, I don't know, the world is a soccer field, but there's no referee.
Exactly. And you can imagine that kind of environment, all that uncertainty, constantly shifting alliances, it creates the perfect breeding ground for all sorts of risks to take root and, explode.
And speaking of risks, Bremmer, he just drops this bombshell right out of the gate. You ready for this? He lists the United States itself as the #1 risk factor for 2024.
I know, right? Even I was like, whoa, okay, that's a bold move, Bremmer. And this isn't just about the election, even though, it is an election year, but he's talking about something much bigger. He argues that the U.S. is facing an actual crisis of democracy right now.
Okay, see, now that's scary. And he ranks this higher than actual wars, global recessions. What makes him so sure that America is the biggest threat out there?
Well, he points to a few things. First, there's this extreme polarization that we're seeing. It's like the country is splitting in two and everyone's retreating to their corners.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the whole misinformation thing. Trust in institutions is just disintegrating. And let's not forget about the potential for election interference. That's huge.
It's like America is this pressure cooker about to blow, and the 2024 election is the match.
No, that's a good one.
So what does he see happening? What's the fallout going to look like?
Well, Bremmer actually gets pretty specific here, outlining a few potential scenarios. And it really depends on who wins, right? Biden or Trump. And both possibilities, they have major global implications. I mean, that's probably why you flagged this in the first place, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens in America doesn't stay in America, right? It ripples out, affects everyone. So let's break it down, those different scenarios. First up, what happens if Trump wins?
Okay, well, buckle up, because Bremmer believes a Trump victory would send shockwaves through the entire international community.
Really? You think it'd be even more intense than last time?
It's different this time, yeah. See, a lot of the things Trump is talking about, those campaign promises, well, if he actually follows through, it would be a radical shift from, decades of U.S. foreign policy. Remember all that stuff about pulling out of NATO, his whole approach to authoritarian leaders? Oh, and we can't forget those trade wars.
Oh, man, the trade wars. It feels like just yesterday we were all glued to our phones, just waiting for the next tweet. But are those really more than just campaign promises? Would he actually do it again?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But Bremmer seems to think that, a second Trump administration could very well mean a return to those policies and the global impact.
Yeah.
Let's just say it wouldn't be pretty. But it's not just about foreign policy either. What's happening inside the U.S. is just as concerning.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then. What does Bremmer think a second Trump term would mean for America itself?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially terrifying.
Yeah.
He believes that a Trump victory would actually deepen those divisions that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Push the country closer to what he calls a constitutional crisis.
A constitutional crisis. Okay, I'm not going to lie, that sounds pretty serious. What does that even mean? What would that look like?
Well, imagine a scenario where the very foundations of American democracy are called into question. The peaceful transfer of power, the rule of law, that whole system of checks and balances that's supposed to keep everything running smoothly, all of a sudden, it's all hanging by a thread.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, definitely not business as usual if Trump makes a comeback.
Yeah.
But what about Biden? What if he wins? Does Bremmer think that would, calm things down, get America back on track.
If only it were that simple, right? Unfortunately, Bremmer says that even if Biden wins, it's not going to be a magic fix.
So even a Biden win wouldn't be smooth sailing. Man, I'm starting to think there's no good ending here.
There are no easy answers, that's for sure. Bremmer argues that Biden would still face huge challenges, like trying to bridge that partisan divide we talked about, restoring faith in American institutions. It's a tall order. Plus, there's always the possibility that Trump could contest the election results again, right?
Yeah.
And that could lead to, well, even more chaos and instability.
It's like this constant state of uncertainty is just becoming the new normal for America.
Yeah.
But how does all of this, this internal struggle, how does it affect the rest of the world?
That's the big question, right? Because when America is struggling internally, it weakens its position on the world stage. And that creates a void, a lack of global leadership. And if you remember what we were talking about earlier, the whole G0 world thing, a power vacuum at the top, well, that's a recipe for instability and conflict.
It's like the U.S. is a ship without a captain, and everyone else is just kind of holding their breath, hoping it doesn't run aground.
Yeah.
But even if America gets its act together, there are other fires brewing around the world, right?
Yeah, you're right. And there's one region in particular that has Bremmer really worried. The Middle East.
Yeah, because it's never simple there, is it? What's Bremmer's take?
Well, he calls it Middle East on the brink. Not exactly subtle, right?
On the brink. That's not reassuring. Especially with all the, the progress we were seeing with those Abraham Accords and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Back in 2020, remember, there was that feeling that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to shift towards, some kind of peace in the region.
Yeah, Israel normalizing relations, the Gulf states finding common ground, even China stepping in to, broker those talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
I felt like a turning point.
Exactly. But Bremmer's argument is that while everyone was focused on those positive developments, this other thing was happening in the background. Like I don't know.
Like a powder keg.
Yes. Like a powder keg just waiting to explode. And the fuel for that powder keg, the same thing it always is, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And that powder keg, it kind of blew up, didn't it, with all the violence in Gaza?
It did, and it's far from over. In fact, Bremmer believes this is just the beginning.
So not just to contain conflict, then. How does he see it escalating?
Well, he points to a few potential flashpoints. One of them is Hezbollah.
Right, Hezbollah, that Iran-backed group based in Lebanon.
Exactly. They could easily get involved on the northern front with Israel. And with Israel feeling increasingly isolated, internationally, their current government might be more likely to take aggressive action against any perceived threats.
And that would provoke a response from Hezbollah.
Exactly. Which could then, ignite a whole new front in the conflict. And we can't forget about Iran.
Oh, right, because they're like the puppet masters behind Hezbollah.
Well, they definitely have a vested interest in maintaining their influence in the region and keeping the pressure on Israel. A wider conflict would give them the perfect opportunity to do both.
And then there are all those Iranian proxies, right? Like those Shia militias operating in Syria and Iraq.
You got it. They could easily get dragged into the fight, maybe start targeting U.S. interests, and then things escalate even further. It's just this tangled web of conflicts, all interconnected, just waiting for the right moment to blow up.
And it's not just about, politics and strategy either.
Mm-hmm.
There are real people caught in the middle of all this.
Absolutely. That human cost is something Bremmer emphasizes. He argues that the violence in Gaza, it's inflamed tensions across the region and beyond, leading to increased radicalization, potentially inspiring more attacks even, both at home and abroad.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the geopolitical maneuvering, but at the end of the day, it's real people who pay the price.
Exactly. And you know what worries Bremmer the most?
What's that?
A direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran.
Oh, man. And with good reason, right? I mean, that would be bad, like really bad.
Catastrophic, actually. Economically, politically, we're talking skyrocketing oil prices, probably a global recession, maybe even a broader conflict engulfing the entire region.
Okay, now I need one of those stress balls. But even if we, somehow avoid a full-blown war between the U.S. and Iran, it doesn't sound like Bremmer is very optimistic about the Middle East anytime soon.
Not really. He's pretty pessimistic about the chances for a lasting peace. He sees all those underlying issues, the Israeli occupation, the Palestinian refugee crisis, the whole two-state solution thing, and he just doesn't see a way out in the current political climate.
It's like we're so focused on putting out the immediate fire in Gaza that we're ignoring the fact that the whole house is built on a fault line.
That's one way to put it. And until those deeper issues are addressed, the Middle East is going to remain this tinderbox just waiting for a spark.
It's almost like we're watching a slow-motion car crash in real time.
Yeah.
We know it's going to be bad, but we just can't look away.
That's a pretty chillingly accurate way to describe it. And this sense of a world on edge, of traditional powers struggling to maintain control. It leads us to another one of Bremmer's top risks, ungoverned AI.
AI. Okay, that feels like a whole other thing.
Uh.
How do we go from, like, the Middle East to artificial intelligence? I don't get it. How do we go from, like, rockets and missiles to, like, lines of code?
It might seem like a jump, but they're connected. Think back to what we were talking about earlier, that G0 world.
Right, where no one's really in charge.
Exactly. And AI has the potential to be a total game changer, like completely reshape the global landscape, but
if no one's in charge.
Exactly. It could become chaotic really fast.
So instead of, I don't know, fighting over oil fields, it'll be fighting over who controls AI.
Kind of, yeah. Think about it. AI and warfare, that's changing rapidly. Economies, AI could disrupt everything, even democracy itself, with all that AI-powered disinformation floating around. It's a lot.
Yeah, and if everyone's already on edge because, well, no one's steering the ship, it's like any little disruption could spiral out of control.
Totally. And that's why Bremmer is so worried about what he calls ungoverned AI. Basically, it's this incredibly powerful technology developing with zero oversight, no real rules. No one's really talking about how to handle this stuff.
Isn't that like, I don't know, giving a teenager the keys to, like, a nuclear power plant? It's an accident waiting to happen.
That's a scary thought, yeah. And Bremmer says we need to get ahead of this now, like right now, more international cooperation, he says. But even that's tricky.
Because everyone has to agree. And in a G0 world...
Good luck getting everyone to agree on what to have for lunch.
Right. So what are we supposed to do?
Well, Bremmer suggests starting small, maybe ethical guidelines for AI development, the basics. Transparency would be good too. Like, what are you actually building over there?
Right.
And most importantly, he says we need more countries actually talking to each other about this. Collaboration, not just competition.
Less fighting, more talking. I mean, it sounds good, but is that really realistic?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Especially in a G0 world, it's like, who calls that meeting? Who gets everyone on the same page?
It's true. But, okay, say we do somehow get a handle on the whole AI thing.
Yeah.
Bremmer still has concerns, right? Like, what was that other big challenge he mentioned?
Oh, yeah. He calls it the resource scramble. Basically, even if we get AI sorted, even if climate change magically disappears tomorrow...
We still need stuff.
We still need stuff. Energy, minerals, all the things that keep the lights on in the world running. And as we're trying to, go green, transition to sustainable energy and all that...
We need different stuff.
Exactly. Think lithium for those electric car batteries, cobalt for solar panels. Demand for that stuff is about to go through the roof. But not every country has these resources, right? Some have a lot, some have basically none. And you can bet those have-nots aren't just going to sit back and watch the haves get rich, are they?
So it's like we're just replacing oil with lithium. Cobalt, whatever the new hot resource is.
You got it. And Bremmer says this whole scramble for those critical minerals, it's going to shake things up. New alliances, maybe even new conflicts, who knows?
So we solve one global problem and walk right into another. Typical.
Well, it's not quite that simple. The good news is, at least we see these challenges coming.
Yeah.
We have a chance to get ahead of it, maybe avoid those mistakes we made with oil.
It's a lot to take in, but it's really important stuff. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not all doom and gloom, right? We still have choices to make, a say in how this all plays out.
100%. We have the power to shape the future, even with all these crazy challenges. What we do now, today, all of us, it matters.
Wow. That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
It really feels like we're at a crossroads.
We are. And the best we can do is, try to make the best choices. For ourselves, for each other, for the planet. It's all connected.
It really is. Well, on that note, a huge thank you to you for, being our guide through all of this. I learned a lot, even if some of it did keep me up last night.
Always happy to nerd out about global politics. And hey, at least we're not alone, right?
That's true. And to all our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this wild ride. It's a lot to think about, but hey, stay curious, keep asking the tough questions, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.